Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Nootropics podcast.
Oh, snap, everyone. The mighty ashwagandha. So this podcast, my friends, is going to dive deep into the mechanisms and the effects of one of the most impressive Ayurvedic herbs on the roster that I also consider a nootropic compound. It's called ashwagandha. I first messed with the almighty Gandha, as I might affectionately refer to it as here in the podcast, about 4 years ago when I was in my first couple years of nootropic experimentation. I actually remember taking, I think the first time I fussed with it was me taking 500, or one of the first couple times I took 500 milligrams of ashwagandha with 600 milligrams of choline bitartrate, and I remember getting some pretty pleasant effects from that combo, and from there I was totally convinced. And by the way, we're going to kind of talk about this a little later on in the podcast, but the one of the reasons probably that I got such a great result is because this is a cholinergic compound as well. It works on acetylcholine esterase, and I was taking it with 600 milligrams of choline bitartrate, so that combo is something that, as a side note, folks might want to remember to take as a good nootropic. Gandha is very calming. For me, it induces a clear focus capacity. It seems to have sort of a balancing effect that may be related to the compound's ability to lower resting cortisol levels, something we'll talk about a little later. Cortisol is a stress hormone that if it gets too high, you're just going to run into a bunch of trouble. You'll feel wound up or anxious, and it affects digestion. And now we're finding that it underlies a lot of the creation of some of the modern diseases that we deal with as Americans, and I think as humans all across the world. Also, which we're going to get into here in a bit, and like I just mentioned before, ashwagandha has a bit of an effect on the cholinergic system, acting as a mild acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, which plausibly gives rise to the functional nootropic benefits that you get when taking the mighty herb, and the benefits that I've experienced taking it in the past, and I'm sure a lot of other people have too. I think that in the class of nootropic compounds that you can probably take safely long term, like this is one of the things that I like to talk about often. I think Alkar is in that group, Aniracetam is in that group, and a bunch of others. With proper cycling, I really think ashwagandha might be a great candidate for that category. I've always loved ashwagandha's effect on my sleep, my brain performance in general, and my well-being. And in this podcast, we're going to expand upon some of these major points in great detail. So sit back, throw down some Aniracetam, and get ready, my friends, for number 11 of the Cortex Nootropics podcast, ashwagandha, the mother of herbal nootropics. I gotta tell you, having been an entrepreneur for 6 years, I will not go through the rest of my life without taking smart drugs. Aniracetam, piracetam, uridine monophosphate, Alkar, CDP choline. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
The first thing I want to do is quickly explain what ashwagandha is and how I discovered it. Gandha, as I'll refer to it in this podcast, is an herb from Ayurveda. It's commonly used in the nootropics community to induce a smooth calm in the brains of its users. It's an adaptogen, so it acts to help the body deal with stress, and does so by lowering resting cortisol levels, a stress hormone that, if it gets out of control, is really going to wreak havoc on a person's happiness and well-being. It's 100% legal to use and purchase in the United States of America, probably many other countries too. I guess you'll have to sort of check around, Google around to see if it's legal in your country, but I don't see that this would ever be classified or scheduled as a drug in any country, because it is an Ayurvedic herb, and it's available as a dietary supplement in the United States of America. I first discovered ashwagandha in it was like a random nootropic blend that I bought from a vitamin store, or like the vitamin section of a grocery store years ago. I took it, and within about 2 hours, I remember this profound calm coming over me, and I was impressed. It was almost like my sense of well-being finally returned to my body, because this was back in the day, in the early moments of a company that I started in 2010 that repairs iOS devices for corporations, when I was basically super stressed out all the time. I was juggling way too many tasks for like one dude to deal with as a young entrepreneur, and getting a sense of well-being like restored back into my brain was like, wow, like, this is what this feels like again. I was that's when I was super impressed about ashwagandha. And that's kind of how it made an impact on me. That night, actually, I remember sleeping so well and waking up so refreshed that I felt like I was a different person, like literally in a different world, like in a different body. I was like, is this my body? I mean, I didn't recognize it, up until that point, but prior to that, like I had been walking around all day, basically all the time, feeling tense and stressed and stressed out. And, I never really actually felt good and content about anything. I mean, certain things would make me happy here and there, but like I just didn't have an overall sense of well-being. And if you take ashwagandha, you'll come to understand what I'm referring to by this profound sense of well-being. And that was, like a wake-up call for me. Keep taking ashwagandha, Ryan. Keep taking it. And two, seriously get a hold of your stress levels. So I went on to take the herb on and off throughout the next 4 years, and to this day, I mean, it's still a major part of my life. It plays a major role in the sort of Rolodex of my nootropic intake throughout the week and throughout the months. I take it a few times a week in certain situations when I really need to tone down the stress, and I got to tell you guys, it's been delightful the entire time. Like, never did it like lose efficacy or change the way that it was affecting me. It's just been great every time. I'd really suggest it to people that are trying to find natural ways to improve sleep performance without taking pharma drugs that induce side effects in other systems like working memory and verbal fluency. I know a friend of mine who buys the Cortex nootropic stack, our stack, just because he's prescribed a benzodiazepine and a few other drugs to help with a variety of anxiety issues that he has and sleep issues that he has, which, by the way, I'm trying to actually get him to start taking ashwagandha, but his doctor is giving him a little trouble about it. But that has memory and verbal recall issues because of the benzodiazepine. So taking Cortex alleviates that stuff for him. So that's a good example of pharma drug messing with your working memory and messing with your verbal fluency. So let's talk about the composition and details, because I know some of you science people are out there wondering about this. And I think it's actually pretty fascinating. Ashwagandha seems to exert its effects from a few similarly sounding compounds within the herb that sound pretty complex and seem to be close variations of one another. The basic component of ashwagandha is called Withania somnifera, which has a bunch of alkaloids and steroidal lactones in it, which are likely, as far as I can tell from the research, these are the things that are responsible for ashwagandha's effects, at least the calming effects. And the acetylcholinesterase inhibition effects, which we'll talk about. There is a long list of those alkaloids and lactones on ashwagandha's examine.com page, and I'll quote some of the information on the actual blog post that this podcast is going to be hosted on livecortex.com/blog. But if you're interested in really getting into it, head on over to examine.com or Google like examine.com ashwagandha and go to that page and have at it. The half-life for ashwagandha, or how long it's going to stay active in your system, is about 7 hours, which is more than enough time to deliver a great calming effect in acute situations, and even help a person sleep soundly throughout the night when taken close to bedtime. I even think that you can take ashwagandha, and this has been my experience in the past, you could take ashwagandha in the morning, like 9, 10 in the morning, and then sleep better that night because of the way that it affected your cortisol and GABA, which we'll mention here in a bit, throughout the day. The standard dosage for ashwagandha ranges from 300 milligrams to 6 grams per day, the latter of which should be taken probably in 3 different dose increments as far as I can tell. Now, I want to make this clear, though. I've never gone that high, never even close to 6 grams with ashwagandha. I've had great results in reducing stress, promoting well-being, and making my brain function better with as little as 300 milligrams. But typically what I shoot for is 500 to 1,000 milligrams, 500 milligrams to a gram, of an actual capsule of ashwagandha, and or 5 to 10 drops of sublingual ashwagandha that I have in liquid form that I bought from the store that had it. I was like pumped that they had this liquid ashwagandha solution that appears to be comparable to between 400 and 600 milligrams or even 1,000 milligrams of ashwagandha powder or capsule. But your mileage is going to vary, and I think you definitely should experiment with different doses, even different methods of administration. Like maybe you'll do sublingual, maybe you capsule the stuff up, and just so that you can identify a sweet spot that works for you. And one of the things that I've come to understand building a commercial nootropic stack with Cortex and then taking nootropics for 6 years, going on like 6.5 years now, is that the effects are just different for different people, and doses and methods of administration are just different for different people. Let's talk about the effects. Let's really go into the effects, because this is where, this herb takes on like a life of its own. My initial experience, like I talked about years and years ago with ashwagandha, was like that I ended up in this state of remarkable calm. It had come at a point in my life where I was, talk about like being stressed out and running my companies early as an entrepreneur. I was burnt out. In the early years of an Apple technology repair company that I started back in the day, which was great because I needed to calm my brain down and remember how to feel good again. Burnout is a sign, that you need to like go to the beach and look at some water for a while. So it was like it was my brain telling me I needed to calm down. I work myself to the bone sometimes. I'll work and work and work, and I take absolutely no time to actually do other things. like have a personal life or like date, and what this does to me, it is, it induces a profoundly constant stress. It's just always in the background that kind of ruins things like my optimism, my motivation, and all the stuff that I think makes me good as an entrepreneur and as an effective adult in the financial world, and as somebody who just likes to get things done. I'm really not productive when I'm burnt out. So when I took ashwagandha for the first time, and just a short bit later, it was about 2 hours, I had that profound calm I was talking about come over me. And I immediately became interested in this herb and how it might be able to help me in acute situations moving forward to get the job done being an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for like going on 7 years now, and it's stressful. It's really stressful. So I recognize in those early days of experimentation with Ganda that I would go to sleep profoundly calmer, right? I would wake up way more refreshed than usual. And, it actually made me wake up feeling good, which was something that was odd to me during that time. Because, again, I was super stressed out from running my company at the time. And, I got used to not waking up feeling good. And ashwagandha changed that. And that was awesome. These days, when I take the mighty Ganda, it still affects me the same exact way. Like I was saying before, like no change. A profound calm washes over me. Everything becomes a lot more manageable in my head. And I just feel good. I mean, when I get mindful of my body and I start to think about my body, like, and put my brain in sort of, synchronized way, a state with my body, it actually feels good. I can feel my body feeling good. I'm sure that makes sense for people. Like, you can actually feel it in your chest and your torso and that kind of area, your brain and everywhere else. You just feel good. So ashwagandha has been demonstrated to, here's why. Ashwagandha has been demonstrated to lower resting cortisol levels. And cortisol is a necessary but troubling in high quantities type of hormone that is one of the components behind the high-strung fight-or-flight response we're all probably way too familiar with, that we kind of need to get rid of and lower at all times. And Ganda, is a great remedy for that. It also interacts with GABA receptors in the brain. For you science folks and for you, deep nootropic science folks who want to understand mechanisms, GABA A receptors to be precise, in a way that enhances signals that pass through the receptors, which is likely responsible for the anxiolytic and sleep efficacy effects of the herb. I don't have a particular anxiety disorder, but I have in the past, I guess, had trouble with mild panic attacks. I remember there was a period of time where I was like sort of having mild panic attacks, based on the stress of my life and a horrible diet and a variety of other things. And I can, without reservation, say that ashwagandha noticeably takes down my anxiety when I have it, and completely reverses that negative state. I mean, it's like magic when I take the stuff. That's why I'm so pumped about it. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And that's why I think it's a nootropic, along with the cholinergic stuff. And as I've been pointing out, it not only takes the stress away, but it induces a very powerful calm at the same time. So it's kind of like a twofer. Thinking about how that might work, I would confidently refer to both the lowering of resting cortisol, that stress hormone we talked about, and then the binding to and optimization of GABA receptors in the brain. Will it work for you if you have some sort of like crazy, profound anxiety disorder? It might. I have a lot of faith in ashwagandha in treating anxiety and other related conditions. It works wonderfully for me, and I get serious bouts of stress now owning and operating now 2 companies, and looking at the mechanisms of action in the brain, related to GABA receptors and cortisol and all this stuff, it seems reasonably plausible that folks with serious anxiety disorders could benefit from ashwagandha. You know what the best part about it is? Here's the best part. It's cheap. It's widely available. It doesn't, you don't need a prescription to get it, and it doesn't come with many, if any, side effects. I say that not having experienced side effects, but I say that just as a protective clause. Like, I don't know if you will experience or people will experience side effects from it, but I don't think so. I've never experienced any side effects from Ganda, other than feeling totally awesome and sleeping well and then waking up feeling great. I mentioned this earlier, but one of the most impressive components of ashwagandha, and this is where we start talking about basically like why it's a nootropic, to me, is that it's a mild acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. What this means is that it selectively inhibits an enzyme that breaks down and recycles acetylcholine in the brain. So that promotes a wider and more available use of that neurotransmitter, which optimizes mental processing and focus and help you pay attention more and some of these things. Some of the real strong acetylcholine esterase inhibitors out there are galantamine is one of them, and then huperzine A is another compound, both of which are quite powerful, very powerful in fact, and the latter of which should be taken at extremely small doses to get the best effects. The cholinergic actions of ashwagandha make it both a great calming herb and a nootropic at the same time. When I take it, in addition to all those calming things, like I sort of touched on earlier, I notice improvements in specific things around brain function, like verbal recall, sentence formation, speed of processing, and even focus. Like, I can actually sit down and work on something calmly. There's two different types of states that I can get in when I take nootropics to do work, that help me do work, and those are like those super hyped up, powerful, like brain performance inducing, cerebral electrifying states. That's like what we tried to target with Cortex. So if you're interested in a powerful nootropic, get Cortex. If you take modafinil or something, it's similar to that. And then there's kind of the opposite, where things work well, where you've got your brain working well, but you can focus because you're calm. You can focus and engage in things because you're cool, and all that background fire that typically takes place in your brain. When you've got 100 things to think about and it's all like deflecting off of each other in your brain, and there's a cacophony taking place in your neurons. All that stuff goes away. And when you're in that state, which ashwagandha has a great ability to induce for a lot of people, me included, like spectacularly, you really can get a lot of focus work done in it, and it's really pleasurable as a result. Where can you get ashwagandha? Well, ashwagandha is in a lot of dietary supplement stores. You can find it in the supplement arena. Probably the area that deals with brain function, you'll find some ashwagandha. That's actually where I first found it, in a product that I forget what it was called. I think it was called Think Well. I don't remember the brand name, but it talked about stamina and stress on it, and that's what really caught my attention, because, again, right around the time I was super stressed out, looking for something to help me to be less stressed, so that I didn't feel like I wanted to rip my eyes out every day. And also you could do any number of things. You could order it from Powder City. Powder City is a U.S. supplier of nootropic compounds. You could buy capsules on the web. You could go to Amazon and just search ashwagandha and buy some ashwagandha capsules, or if you're heavily into nootropics like I am, and you take it past that level, you buy your own scale and you buy your own stuff, and you like to measure things out and capsule your own stuff. You could buy bulk powder. There's a company that I use called bulksupplements.com, and then there's also Powder City. I don't have any affiliations with these guys, but I really like their products. I've had zero issues with their products in the past. Shipping's always been quick. And then you can make your own capsules of ashwagandha. That's where you get it. Again, the doses are going to vary for you, but I would say start off with an even 500 milligrams. That's a great place to start. Start at 500 milligrams, and then from there, work your way up, or maybe even work your way down. Like 300 might be enough for you. 1,000 might be your sweet spot. For some people, it might be 1,500 milligrams. For some people, it might be 2 grams, 3 grams. For some people, it might actually be 6 grams split up into 3 different doses throughout the day. So you're going to have to experiment with that and see. But I have a suspicion that for a lot of people, it's going to be a lot less than that. For a lot of people, 500 to 1,000 milligrams of this powerful herb and you're going to notice the difference. Things ashwagandha might stack well with. Well, first of all, right off the bat, I think ashwagandha is going to stack very well with cholinergics. Racetam too, we'll talk about that here in a second, but I think, ashwagandha stacks well with cholinergics because it's a mild acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Now, there's one caveat to that I've noticed over the years in taking cholinergics, and that if you're really interested in the stimulatory effect of the cholinergics, like CDP choline or alpha GPC or something, CDP choline more intensely, then the ashwagandha might detract a little bit from the stimulatory nature of some cholinergics, if you're looking for that extra stimulatory aspect of the cholinergics, then it might not be a good idea to take ashwagandha with it. But if you want the good brain performance and the slight stimulation from the cholinergics, but also to feel calm and cool and focused from the GABA effects and from the cortisol effects of the ashwagandha, then stacking it with some CDP choline in low doses or some alpha GPC in low doses, maybe even some choline bitartrate, in moderate doses is definitely a good idea. When it comes to the racetams, I actually have taken ashwagandha and aniracetam in a choline source, and then ashwagandha and oxiracetam in a choline source. And what I notice about the effects is that it is awesome and it is effective, but it definitely did seem to take some, like I said before about the stimulatory nature of some of these compounds, it did seem to take the stimulation off of the racetams, and the cholinergic compounds, which isn't a bad thing. It all depends on what you're looking for. So I would say approach it considering that you're really gonna have to find kind of your sweet spot on doses, and quantities with combos. I would also say that ashwagandha stacks well with Alkar. That's one of the things that I've taken pretty consistently, Alkar, over the years, and I've taken it with ashwagandha, and it works wonderfully. Alkar is both cholinergic in that it will contribute partially to acetylcholine, not as a direct precursor like some of the other choline sources might be, but also Alkar is extremely facilitative of mental energy, and it might have to do with the way that it optimizes mitochondria of brain cells for usage of the substrate of fatty acids for energy in those cells. So I think it's great to stack with Alkar. And finally, I think that if you're taking stacks that are super stimulatory, like N-acetyl L-tyrosine or L-tyrosine, phenylalanine, some of these stacks that just really amp you up, or you drink a whole lot of coffee and you just, that's your thing, you like drinking coffee, or you're a caffeine addict, then then to take some of that extra stimulation from the caffeine or the anxiety that the caffeine might induce, ashwagandha is a great sort of supplement, supplementary action to take. All right, folks, that has been the podcast on ashwagandha. I hope you liked it. I've been meaning to do a podcast and to start writing about ashwagandha for a long time. I think one of you YouTube commenters, which by the way, I really, really thoroughly enjoy interacting with you guys on YouTube that comment on the videos we put out. I really, really love the fact that people like to talk about nootropics and have their input and have things to say about it, and the whole thing is wonderful. Somebody commented on one of our videos about nootropics and talked about ashwagandha. I was like, we just need to do a podcast on ashwagandha. People are people that are new to nootropics and that are in the nootropic space. Ashwagandha always comes up in the conversations in the various Facebook forums and on Reddit. And, it's getting a lot more attention lately, but I just don't think it gets enough attention. And here I am, 6+ years taking nootropics, everything under the sun, from the afanyls to analogs of afanyls to soniferam to all the racetams to uridine and Mr. Happy Stack variants and all this stuff. And I gotta say, ashwagandha it's probably in my top 10. It's probably my top 10 up there with Cortex. And then breaking that down, uridine and CDP choline, oxiracetam, modafinil, adrafinil, and a few others. So I think it's important that we get the word out for people, both from a perspective of trying to help people that have anxiety issues to curb them, and then from the perspective of helping people to just have better functional brains in terms of focus and verbal recall and all these other things that a good focused brain will help you to have, I think it's important for for people to snag some ashwagandha. So grab some from Powder City, grab some from bulksupplements.com, grab some from your local dietary supplement store, and hey, please report back to me if you have any questions about ashwagandha. I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have some experiences on ashwagandha, please comment, or anything else to add to the scientific discussion about ashwagandha, please comment in the comment section wherever you're hearing this, whether it's on YouTube or our blog or wherever, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have not tried the Cortex Nootropic stack, we built that stack trying to make a comparable natural stack to modafinil. Now the Generation 1 stack has launched. That's been out for about 6 months now, and people are just loving that stack. I was surprised. I guess I was hoping for this, but I was really, really pumped and really, really happy and surprised to see people reordering bottles. Now what happens is folks will try the stack. They'll buy a bottle of the stack, they'll take it home, they'll use it, and then 3 weeks later, a month later, 2 months later, I see that same person buying 2 bottles of the stack at the same time, and then they do that iteratively moving forward. They just keep buying a couple bottles of the stack. They tell people about it. It's spreading like wildfire. We've got investors interested in the stack. The Cortex is taking off. If you've not tried it, you got to grab a bottle at livecortex.com. Enter the coupon code STARTUPS, STARTUPS, and you can get $5 off of the stack from me. I really think you're going to enjoy it, and I'd love to hear what you think. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening, everybody. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, because we got a great channel, the Cortex Nootropics channel on YouTube, where we do videos about nootropics. It's me talking about my experiences with nootropics. We even did one recently called Nootropic Experiences, a day with oxiracetam, where I took 700 milligrams of oxiracetam. I filmed it. I filmed me making it. With some CDP choline. I filmed me taking it, and then throughout the day, like every 2 hours, I got on camera and talked about how my brain was working. I actually went and ran one of my companies, while I was under the influence of this nootropic, and the day before I had drank like 7 or 8 beers, and like 4 beers the day before that. So I had this cognitive dullness from the alcohol. And the oxiracetam just took all of that away, and I had a remarkably effective day in terms of brain performance. So we do videos ranging from nootropic experiences to just like my thoughts on nootropics, to like my experiments, sublingually dosing a drafinil, and all this crazy stuff. So check us out on YouTube, the Cortex Nootropics channel on YouTube. And hey, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks for coming. I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Pick up a bottle of the Cortex Nootropic at www.livecortex.com.